I used to measure my mornings by the number of chairs I had to straighten before the first reservation. 6 at the front window, 4 by the narrow wall with the framed ink paintings, 12 in the private room where rich people came to pretend they enjoyed privacy more than being seen entering it. At Seoul House, a restaurant tucked behind an old pharmacy in Yongno, every table had a habit. Table 3 wobbled unless I tucked a folded receipt beneath the right leg. Table 7 always caught the draft from the alley door. The largest private room made even quiet men raise their voices because power did not like being absorbed by wood panels and paper screens. I arrived at 7 every morning, before the cooks, before the deliveries, before the owner remembered to be anxious. I brewed barley tea in the staff kettle, checked the reservations, rewrote the tasting cards by hand because our printer turned every gray line blue, and counted my cash tips from the night before with the discipline of a monk counting sins. Rent first. My mother's therapy copay next. My younger sister's train card after that. If anything remained, I put it in a blue envelope marked Daeon's Foolish Dream, because writing future restaurant on it felt too arrogant for a man who sometimes ate dinner from cracked plastic containers at midnight. My full name was Yu Da-on. I was 29, an Omega, and the floor manager of a restaurant that looked more expensive than it was. People who saw me pouring plum wine into hand-blown glasses assumed I had a graceful life. They did not see me at dawn arguing with the hospital billing app because my mother's rehabilitation sessions had been coded wrong again. They did not see my sister Nari leaving her dance shoes outside our apartment door so the glue smell would not make our mother cough. They did not see the collection notices I kept under the rice cooker because it was the one place Nari never looked. My father had left us with 2 things when he died: an old wool coat with cigarette burns in the lining, and a debt stamped with names I did not recognize. The coat I had thrown away. The debt followed me to work, to the hospital, to the convenience store, sometimes in envelopes and sometimes in the polite voices of men who called themselves mediators. They knew the cost of my mother's medication. They knew Nari's class schedule. They knew when I walked home alone after closing. "Smile less at table 12 tonight," Min Se-jin told me while trimming green onions with the precision of a surgeon. He was our sous chef, my oldest friend, and the only beta I knew who could insult a customer's family history through the seasoning of a soup. They asked whether the Omega manager came with the private room. I'll smile exactly as much as their service charge deserves. They tipped last time with a department store coupon. Then I'll bare my teeth. Se-jin snorted and pushed a plate of egg rolls toward me. He had been feeding me since culinary school, where I worked events, and he fed the staff the mistakes he claimed were experiments. He now lived above the restaurant with his father, who had early dementia and believed every young man in a suit was a tax auditor. Se-jin wanted to leave Seoul House and open a tiny noodle counter where no customer could reserve a private room to behave badly. But he stayed because his father recognized the route from the apartment to this kitchen and not much else. That was how most of us lived. Not trapped by one dramatic chain, just tied down by small knots we could not cut without hurting someone. That Thursday began badly and then worsened with manners. At 10, the fish supplier refused our usual credit. At 11, Nari sent a message asking if she could skip rehearsal because her ankle had swollen again. At noon, an envelope arrived without a return address. I knew before opening it that the paper would be thick, expensive, and unpleasant. The notice inside stated that the remaining debt under my father's private loan had been transferred to a company called Seo-mu-gyeol Asset Recovery. The amount had grown by more than 30 million won overnight through fees I had apparently agreed to by existing. At the bottom, in neat black ink, someone had written, "We prefer conversation before enforcement." I was reading the sentence for the 3rd time when the door chime rang. The restaurant was closed between lunch prep and dinner, so I looked up, ready to say we were not accepting walk-ins. Instead, Park Jae-hyuk stepped inside with Rain on his shoulders and two men behind him. My ex had always dressed like a man on the verge of being photographed by accident. Cream coat, polished shoes, hair arranged to suggest he had not arranged it. He was an alpha with a soft voice and a talent for making cruelty sound like concern. We had dated for 11 months when I was 26. He had liked that I worked hard and hated that I needed money. He said both made him feel useful. When I refused to quit my job and become the hidden omega in his office tell, he told me I had confused pride with value. "Die on," he said, as if we had parted after a small disagreement over coffee. "You look tired. You look employed by someone worse than you." His smile thinned. The men behind him did not laugh. One carried a black folder. The other stood near the door, blocking it with his body rather than his hand. "I came personally because I thought you'd rather not have strangers visit your home." "You brought strangers to my workplace instead." Thoughtful. Jae-hyuk glanced around the dining room. "Still here. I thought you wanted to open your own place." "I also wanted a father who kept receipts. Life is full of disappointments." His eyes moved over my apron, my rolled sleeves, the small burn mark on my wrist from the tea kettle. There had been a time when that look made me feel examined and chosen. Now it felt like someone checking a crack in a cup to decide whether it could still be sold. "Myong-gil bought your father's loan," he said. "You know what happens when such companies become impatient." "I know what happens when men hide threats inside grammar." "I can delay them." "No. You haven't heard the offer." "I remember your offers. They always begin with help and end with a locked door." The man with the folder stepped forward, but Jae-hyuk raised two fingers and stopped him. It annoyed me that the gesture still worked. He had learned command without ever learning decency. "There is a dinner tomorrow," he said. "A private business matter. Powerful guests. I need someone who understands service, conversation, and restraint. Come as my guest. Smile. Let people believe we reconciled. Afterward, I can arrange the debt schedule in a kinder direction." I looked at him until the silence became unprofitable. "You want me to sit beside you while you show people you can still summon me." His expression flickered. "Don't be dramatic. Pay your service charge and leave." "I'm trying to keep this clean." "No, you're trying to keep your fingerprints off it." Sejin appeared behind me with a cleaver in one hand and a towel in the other. He did not raise the knife. He did not need to. He simply looked at the three alphas and said, "We're closed." Jae-hyuk's gaze slid to him, then back to me. "Tomorrow night, 8, Hanul Hotel. Ask yourself whether dignity can cover hospital bills." After they left, Sejin put the cleaver down with too much care. "I'm going to poison him. Don't waste good poison." "I have cheap poison for men like him." I laughed because the alternative was letting my hands shake. Sejin saw anyway. He took the notice from me and read it twice, his mouth flattening. "Dawn." "I know." "You can't go." "I know that too." Knowing did not change the numbers. By closing time, rain had turned the alley outside silver, and my phone had gathered 4 missed calls from an unknown number, 1 message from Nari asking whether I had eaten, and a voicemail from the hospital reminding me of a payment due before Monday. I stood under the awning with a broken umbrella and considered the humiliating mathematics of survival. Some people had savings. I had pride, a transit card, and a phone at 8% battery. A black sedan stopped at the curb. I did not move. In my experience, cars that clean did not stop for people like me unless they had been sent to collect something. The rear window lowered. The man inside was not Jae-hyuk. He was younger than I expected, early 30s perhaps, with a face arranged into calm so complete it looked manufactured. His suit was dark, his tie unremarkable, his watch expensive enough to be deliberately plain. His eyes moved from my broken umbrella to the envelope half visible in my bag, then to the rain pooling around my shoes. "You da on," he said. I tightened my grip on the umbrella handle. "Depends who's asking." "Seo Mu-gyeol." The name landed with weight. Everyone in private hospitality knew the Seo family, though no one discussed them above a whisper. They owned hotels, logistics companies, construction subsidiaries, a gallery foundation, and enough rumors to decorate a cathedral. Seo Mu-gyeol was the eldest grandson, CEO of Seoul Holdings, and heir to the part of the family that never appeared in glossy magazines, but could make police reports misfile themselves. Professionally terrifying, Sejin had once called him, after serving a table of his executives, the kind of man who could make a room behave by entering it late. "I'm not taking new threats tonight," I said. "The schedule is full." Something moved near his mouth. It was not a smile. It might have been the memory of one. "I'm offering work." "At midnight from a car?" "It's 9:40. Emotionally, it's midnight." He looked past me at the restaurant, then back. "You were invited to dinner tomorrow by Park Jae-hyuk." My skin tightened. I didn't accept. "You shouldn't." I enjoy arriving at obvious conclusions independently. "Then arrive at this one. Come with me instead." For a moment, the rain was louder than everything else. "No," I said. He did not blink. "You haven't asked why." "I'm learning from my mistakes. Men in expensive coats keep inviting me to dinner and calling it opportunity." His driver opened the door and stepped out with a large black umbrella, but Mu-gyeol lifted one hand. The driver stopped. Interesting. He was used to being obeyed, but not noisy about it. Mu-gyeol opened the car door himself and stepped into the rain. Water darkened his shoulders immediately. He did not seem to notice. "Park Jae-hyuk will use you as proof that he can still control what he discarded. My former fiancé will be at the same dinner. He will use Park to suggest I cannot keep an Omega beside me unless a contract or threat is involved. I need to correct that impression." "You need a date to humiliate your ex." "Yes." The honesty was so plain I almost respected it against my will. "That's pathetic." "Yes." That made me pause. Most alphas defended their pride like a holy site. Seo Mu-gyeol simply stood in the rain and admitted to petty strategy with the expression of a man signing tax forms. "I don't sell humiliation as a service," I said. "You would be paid for attendance, conversation, and leaving unharmed." People always put the worst parts in smaller words. He reached into his coat and handed me a card. Not a business card. A folded note with a phone number and a name, Attorney Moon High-Rim. I knew the name because she had represented restaurant workers in a wage theft case and won against a hotel chain. Under it was another line, Independent Counsel, paid by me, directed by you. "You contacted a lawyer before speaking to me?" "I asked for the name of someone who would tell you to refuse me if refusal was best." I looked up sharply. He continued, "If you come tomorrow, I will have my Yonggil asset recovery audited by Monday. If your father's debt is legitimate, I will restructure it without interest and without contact from collectors. If it is not, I will make the forgery expensive for whoever benefits from it. Your mother's current hospital bill will be covered through a medical foundation that cannot demand anything from you later. Very noble. Also extremely convenient for you. I am not noble. No argument there. I am useful." Rain slid down the side of his face. He did not wipe it away. I noticed, against my will, that he kept his hands visible. No sudden movements. No driver hovering with an umbrella. No folder thrust at my chest. He had researched enough to know my pressure points, which made him dangerous. He had also given me the name of a lawyer before making his offer, which made him inconveniently less simple. "What do you want me to say at this dinner?" I asked. "Nothing false that traps you." "That is not an answer." "Then this is, sit beside me. Let them assume closeness. If someone insults you, answer as yourself. If you wish to leave, tell me once and we leave." "And if your ex is not humiliated enough?" "That will be his private disappointment." I laughed once, short and tired. "You're very calm for a man hiring a fake date in an alley." "I panicked earlier." "You did?" "Internally." Must have been dramatic for everyone involved. This time the memory at his mouth became almost visible. "Call Attorney Moon. Ask about the offer. If she advises against it, don't come. If you decide to accept, be at Hanul Hotel at 7:30. A suit will be sent to the restaurant. You can refuse the suit." How generous. It was selected by someone with better taste than mine. "At least you know your limits." "I know many of them." He returned to the car without asking whether I had an umbrella. That was the first thing about him that unsettled me. He had noticed the broken ribs of mine, noticed my wet shoes, noticed enough about my life to offer exactly what would make refusal difficult. And still, he did not perform kindness for me to applaud. The sedan pulled away, and I stood in the rain with the lawyer's number softening between my fingers. Attorney Moon answered at 10:12 as if late-night calls from desperate omegas were part of her leisure. Her voice was clear, brisk, and entirely unimpressed by Seo Mu-gyeol. She told me she had agreed to review any documents before I signed them, that her fee had been placed in escrow, and that she would withdraw if she sensed coercion. I slept badly and woke to Nari stretching her injured ankle on the kitchen floor with a frozen tangerine wrapped in a towel. She listened while I explained Jae-hyuk's visit and Mu-gyeol's offer, then told me I was getting stupid with the exhausted honesty only a younger sister can afford. When she said she could quit dance, the word no left me too fast and her face closed. "You make decisions, dress them as sacrifice, then ask me not to notice," she said. I carried that sentence to Attorney Moon's office, where she confirmed that Myong-gil asset recovery was tied to Jae-hyuk's uncle, and that Mu-gyeol's medical foundation offer was clean. Annoyingly clean, with no personal obligation attached. "Dinner is foolish," she told me, taking off her glasses. "It may also buy time. Go because you decide the risk is useful, not because an alpha made danger sound organized." I thought of Nari's ankle, my mother's damaged grip, and my father's debt-growing teeth in the dark. "Then put everything in writing," I said. The suit arrived at the restaurant at 4 in a garment bag carried by a woman who introduced herself as Seoul, Mr. Seo's chief secretary, and looked at our cracked entrance tile as if calculating whether it was a metaphor. She had silver-framed glasses, a navy coat, and the composure of a palace official in a modern drama where everyone else dies first. "Mr. Seo said you may refuse the suit," she said. "I do." She nodded and held out a second garment bag. "He anticipated pride. This one is a rental under your name, selected according to sizes taken from your work uniform, with no purchase obligation. Attorney Moon approved the invoice structure." Si-jin, who had been pretending not to listen from the kitchen, coughed into his fist. I wanted to be offended. I was offended. I was also a professional in a dining room where appearances were sharpened into weapons, and the suit inside the second bag was dark green, beautifully cut, and simple enough not to make me look borrowed. "I hate him a little," I said. Secretary Im's expression did not change. He receives that response often. At 7:30, I arrived at Hanul Hotel, wearing the green suit and my own black shoes polished with kitchen paper. Seo Mu-gyeol waited near a private elevator, speaking quietly to an older man with a scar near his ear. He turned before I reached them, as if he had sensed motion rather than seen me. His gaze moved once from my face to my cuffs, then stopped. No lazy inspection, no smile meant to reward me. Just attention, exact and briefly inconvenient. "You came," he said. "I bill for waiting. Secretary Im has the account information." I was joking. I wasn't. The older man with the scar looked away. I suspected he was laughing internally with more success than Mu-gyeol had managed in the rain. Mu-gyeol held out his arm. "May I?" I stared at it. "Already?" "The corridor has cameras." Of course, romance begins with surveillance. Many disasters do. I took his arm because I had agreed to play a part, and because the sooner I began, the sooner I could finish. His sleeve was smooth under my fingers. His body did not crowd mine. That, too, I noticed and resented noticing. Most alphas performed nearness as a claim. Mu-gyeol offered his arm like a railing on a steep stair, available, steady, not offended if unused. The private dining room overlooked the river. 8 people sat around a table arranged with white peonies, crystal glasses, and knives so polished they reflected the ceiling lights. Park Jae-hyuk was there, of course. Beside him sat Chae Won-ik, Mu-gyeol's former fiancé, an omega from a family that owned 3 hospitals and a newspaper. He was beautiful in the expensive, bored way of people who had never carried groceries uphill. Across from them were Seo relatives and 2 executives whose names I knew from business pages. The room paused when we entered. Jae-hyuk's face did something satisfying. It did not collapse. Men like him trained their expressions too well for that. But the corners sharpened. His gaze dropped to my hand resting on Mu-gyeol's sleeve, then to the suit he knew he had not bought for me. Mu-gyeol pulled out my chair himself. The panic came later. At that moment, he was still calm. "Yuda-on," he said to the table. "My guest." Chae Won-ik tilted his head. "How unexpected. I thought Mr. Yu was attending with Director Park." "I declined," I said, sitting. "I had a better offer." A faint sound traveled through the room. Not laughter, not shock. The tiny pleasure of people recognizing a knife placed correctly. Jae-hyuk smiled. Daeon has always enjoyed dramatic entrances. I work in hospitality. Timing matters. Mu-gyeol sat beside me. His hand rested near his glass, still. I could feel his attention without turning. He had told me to answer as myself. So I did. The first course arrived, and with it, the first test. Chae asked how I knew Mu-gyeol. His tone implied there were only 3 possible answers, and all of them could be purchased. I lifted my spoon, tasted the pine nut soup, and smiled politely. He corrected a mistake someone else made. How heroic. "Efficient," I said. "Heroism usually arrives late and expects applause." One of the older executives covered his mouth with a napkin. Jae-hyuk leaned back. "Daeon is witty when nervous." "I'm less witty when bored, so please continue." Mu-gyeol picked up his water glass. His mouth touched the rim. Only I was close enough to see he had stopped drinking. His fingers tightened once around the glass, then eased. Panic, I realized, could look like stillness if a man had disciplined himself long enough. The dinner moved from insult to inquiry. Someone asked about my family. Someone mentioned my profession as if restaurant work were a charming volunteer activity. I answered each question with enough truth to be unhelpful. Yes, I managed service at Sorai House. Yes, the private room acoustics there were better than Hanul's because old wood had more mercy than marble. Yes, I supported my family. No, support did not make me available for pity. When the grilled fish arrived, Jae-hyuk tried a softer weapon. Daeon used to talk about opening a place of his own. A sweet idea. Small tables, cheap flowers, people who paid with gratitude. I set down my chopsticks. You never listened past the part where you imagined yourself funding it. The actual plan was an accessible dining room with braille menus, low-noise hours twice a week, and staff trained to serve customers who need time without making them feel like burdens. The table changed. Not much, enough. Mu-gyeol turned his head toward me. He knew about my mother's hospital bills, my debt, my address. He had not known that. I could tell from the way his gaze went quiet and newly focused, as if I had placed a document in front of him written in a language he wanted to learn before morning. Che noticed. His smile sharpened. How admirable. Does Mr. Seo share that dream, or is tonight too early for shared dreams? I looked at Mu-gyeol. This was the moment I should have kept the performance modest. Attendance, conversation, leaving unharmed. Those were the terms. But Jae-hyuk was watching me with the old confidence of a man waiting for me to fold. And Che had turned me into a decorative challenge, and I had spent years making myself smaller at tables where men measured my worth between courses. So I played the role too well. I reached over and adjusted Mu-gyeol's cuff, a small, intimate gesture I had seen wealthy spouses use to claim space without vulgarity. His arm froze under my fingers. "We don't share dreams yet," I said. "We compare terms." Across the table, Seo Yeonhwa, Mu-gyeol's aunt, looked up with interest. She was in her 50s, elegant, and so composed she made Mu-gyeol seem expressive. "And are the terms favorable?" I withdrew my hand from his cuff. "That depends on whether Mr. Seo has learned to listen when the answer is no." Mu-gyeol looked at me then, slowly. The panic finally showed, not in his face but in the quarter-second delay before he spoke. "I'm learning." The room believed him. That was the problem. By dessert, the dinner had stopped being about humiliating an ex and become a quiet family assessment. Seo Yeonhwa asked where I had studied service management. I told her I had learned from a hotel program I could not afford to finish, and from older servers who knew how to survive customers with expensive watches. One executive asked if my presence had been disclosed to the succession committee. Che went still. Jae-hyuk looked at Mu-gyeol with fresh calculation. Succession committee. The phrase explained the old men, the careful flowers, the way Mu-gyeol's former fiancé had expected a performance of weakness rather than jealousy. I had walked into a dinner with more knives under the table than on it. When we left, Mu-gyeol's hand touched the small of my back for the cameras near the hallway. The contact lasted less than a breath. It was still the first time he had touched me without asking aloud, and he must have felt me stiffen because his hand dropped immediately. In the elevator, he pressed the stop button between floors. I stared at him. Kidnapping by architecture? I need 1 minute without cameras. You have 40 seconds before I start pressing things. He faced the doors, not me. Seoul glittered beyond the glass wall at the end of the corridor outside, too far away to help anyone. You were effective. That sounded painful to admit. It was. Did I ruin your plan? Yes. I should have been frightened. Instead, exhaustion made me irritable. Then, next time, hire someone less competent. There may have to be a next time. No. You da-on. No. He turned. The elevator light cut his face into clean planes, leaving his eyes darker than before. My grandfather's succession condition requires a legitimate spouse before the winter vote. I had intended to appear attached enough to weaken Chae-won-ik's influence, and then solve the matter through another route. Tonight, my aunt saw you refuse me in public while making me look more stable than I have looked in 5 years. Congratulations on your accidental stability. She will move fast. Let her move without me. Park will move faster. The anger drained out of me, leaving something colder. Explain. His uncle's company owns your father's debt. After tonight, humiliating you quietly will not be enough. He will try to prove you are unstable, purchasable, or criminal. If he succeeds, my family will use you as an argument against me, and Park will use your family as leverage against you. You said if I wanted to leave, we would leave. We did. You did not say leaving the room would make the room follow me. No, he said. I underestimated you. It would have been easier if he had underestimated the danger. Men often did. Instead, he named the more irritating truth. The elevator began moving again when he released the button. In the lobby, cameras waited with open mouths. Mu-gyeol did not touch me this time. He walked beside me with enough space for refusal and enough proximity for rumor. Outside, Secretary Im stood by the car. Attorney Moon was there too, holding an umbrella and wearing the expression of a woman who planned to bill someone for moral inconvenience. "Congratulations," she said to me. "You made the business news." I looked at Mu-gyeol. "You called my lawyer?" "I thought you would prefer her before my relatives." I hated that he was right. Attorney Moon took me home in a taxi instead of letting me enter Mu-gyeol's car. She spent the entire ride reading messages and making small sounds of professional disgust. By the time we reached my apartment, 3 gossip accounts had posted blurred photographs of my hand on Mu-gyeol's cuff. One headline called me a mystery omega. Another asked whether Seo Mu-gyeol had chosen love over alliance. A third used Jae-hyuk's name and mine in the same sentence, which made my stomach tighten. Nari was awake when I entered. She had a blanket around her shoulders and my mother's pill organizer in her lap. Our mother slept in the bedroom, unaware that the world had found a new way to be expensive. "You're online," Nari said. I tried staying offline. People objected. Her eyes scanned my suit, my face, my hands. "Did he hurt you?" "No." "Did you agree to anything?" "Dinner, sarcasm, brief cuff adjustment." "This is not funny." "I know." Her anger looked different from mine. Mine sharpened outward, hers folded in, protecting the softest part until it became a bruise no one could touch. "Appa, if you marry some criminal alpha because of us, I will never forgive you." "I haven't married anyone." "Yet." That word sat between us all night. The next morning, a man waited outside Soray House with a camera, and our owner nearly fainted into the kimchi fridge. By noon, 2 reservations had canceled. One had tripled in size, hoping to see drama, and Sejin had threatened to serve press photographers soup made from mop water. I kept working because plates still needed placement and dignity sometimes looked like refilling tea while strangers whispered your name. At 3, Secretary Im arrived through the back entrance with no entourage and a folder pressed to her chest. "Mr. Seo requests a meeting," she said. "I request a new identity." "That can be arranged, but Attorney Moon would object." Sejin pointed a ladle at her. "Is this meeting the kind where our Daon comes back with more problems?" Secretary Im considered him. "Probably, but they may be more organized problems." I took my apron off. "That is the Seo family motto, isn't it?" She blinked once. "Unofficially." Mu-gyeol's office occupied the upper floors of Seorin Holdings, a tower in Uido where even the heir seemed to have passed a background check. Attorney Moon was already in the conference room when I arrived, along with a man introduced as Kim San, internal counsel, and Seo Yeon-hwa, the aunt from dinner. Mu-gyeol stood by the window, jacket off, sleeves buttoned, as if comfort had been offered to him and rejected for being inefficient. On the table lay draft documents. I did not sit. "No." Attorney Moon smiled faintly. Mu-gyeol looked at me. "You haven't read them." "I'm practicing speed." Seo Yeon-hwa folded her hands. "Mr. Yu, the family's position is simple. Last night changed public perception. My father's rules for succession are old-fashioned, inconvenient, and currently useful. Mu-gyeol needs a spouse recognized by the family registry before the winter vote. You need protection from Park Jae-hyuk's side and from the debt structure attached to your father's name. Everyone keeps telling me what I need. What do you want? She asked. The question was so direct that I distrusted it. I want my mother's treatment secured without a hook in it. I want the debt proven or destroyed. I want my sister left alone. I want my job. I want my future restaurant to remain mine, even if it stays an envelope under my rice cooker for another 10 years. I want no one to touch me for cameras without permission. I want a room with a lock if I have to live anywhere. I want the right to leave without being punished through people I love. Seo Yeonhwa's gaze shifted to Mu-gyeol. You chose someone inconvenient. I noticed. You noticed after the cuff, I said. His eyes returned to mine. During the soup. That was annoying. I had been good during the soup. Attorney Moon slid a document toward me. I added preliminary terms before you arrived. You had that much faith in my ability to get cornered? I had faith in their lack of shame. The arrangement took 7 hours to negotiate. 7 hours. My first fake romance was less romantic than renewing a lease. Attorney Moon argued over every word. I argued over the words she missed. Mu-gyeol said little, which forced me to learn the difference between silence used as pressure and silence used as attention. When his counsel tried to soften the exit clause into something elegant and useless, Mu-gyeol interrupted. Plain language, he said. Kim San looked startled. Sir? He leaves when he chooses. The benefits already transferred remain transferred. No penalty through family, employment, debt, housing, or medical payments. Write it so my grandfather understands he can't break it. For the first time that day, I sat. The contract, once stripped of lace and poison, had a 9-month term with review at 3. Public appearances limited to family events, business functions involving succession, and emergencies approved by both parties. Separate bedrooms, no medical decisions without explicit authorization. No shared finances except an account for household expenses, with statements accessible to me and Attorney Moon. Security assigned to my family but required to remain visible and dismissible unless credible threat was documented. My job protected, my wages untouched, my future business ideas not subject to Seoul investment unless I requested it in writing after the agreement ended. If legal marriage became necessary, dissolution papers would be prepared in advance and held by Attorney Moon. You're asking me to marry you with divorce papers already signed, Mu-gyeol said after reading that clause. I'm asking you to prove the door exists before I step inside. He looked at the page for a long moment. Fair. The word had no decoration. That made it heavier. The marriage took place 6 days later in a district office with fluorescent lights and a clerk who had seen enough strange couples to be bored by ours. I wore my own gray coat. Mu-gyeol wore a black suit and brought 2 witnesses, Secretary Im and the older scarred man, whose name was Baek Jun. Attorney Moon came as my witness and legal conscience. Nari refused to attend, then appeared 3 minutes late, wearing a hoodie and fury. I'm here to object if needed, she said. The clerk looked alarmed. It's fine, I told him. She objects recreationally. Nari did not smile. Mu-gyeol turned to her and bowed, not deeply enough to flatter, not shallowly enough to insult. You Nari, she crossed her arms. Seo Mu-gyeol. I have no excuse that will satisfy you. Good, don't try. I won't. That seemed to confuse her. She had prepared for arrogance, not obedience. When the clerk asked us to confirm the registration, my hand hesitated over the pen. Not because I doubted the math. The numbers were clear. Hospital bills paid directly. Debt challenge filed. Security for Nari's studio. Attorney Moon holding the exit in a drawer only she could open. I hesitated because paper changed the weight of air. A fake date could be laughed off as performance. A legal marriage, even temporary, entered databases, family meetings, introductions. It gave strangers a word for me they would believe more easily than my name. Mu-gyeol noticed. Of course he did. "We can stop," he said. The clerk blinked again. Attorney Moon watched him sharply. Nari's arms lowered a fraction. Stopping would not make Jae-hyuk kinder or the debt smaller. It would not erase the dinner photographs, but the offer mattered because it cost him. His aunt had already called twice that morning. His grandfather had sent a message through Baek-jun demanding confirmation before noon. A man like Seo Mu-gyeol did not offer delay unless delay had consequence. I signed. "So romantic," Nari muttered. I handed her the pen. "You can write that in the guest book." "There is no guest book." Then on his car. Mu-gyeol said, "Use the rear door. The paint is due for repair." Nari stared at him, betrayed by the possibility that he might have humor. I nearly laughed, and the sound almost escaped as something else. Living in Mu-gyeol's penthouse taught me that expensive spaces could be deeply inconvenient. Everything opened silently, which meant I bumped into cabinets I expected to resist. The kitchen had 3 ovens and no dish towel within human reach. The guest bedroom was larger than my entire apartment, but smelled like unused linen and money. The view of the river was beautiful in a way that made me suspicious, as if the city were trying to distract me from the fact that I did not know which drawer held spoons. On the first night, Mu-gyeol gave me a key card, a house phone, a printed list of staff contacts, and a small black device. "No tracking," he said before I asked. "Panic button. It calls Baek-jun, Secretary Im, and your lawyer in that order. Attorney Moon insisted on being second, but Secretary Im is faster in emergencies." I turned the device over in my palm. "You negotiated my panic button hierarchy?" "For 40 minutes. Who won?" "Attorney Moon. Secretary Im is listed first in the device, but Attorney Moon receives an automatic transcript of every activation." "That woman is terrifying." "Yes." I looked around the guest room. "Are there cameras?" "Hallways, entrances, elevator, kitchen exterior. None in bedrooms, bathrooms, study, or inner living room. You have access to the feed logs." "You expect me to understand feed logs?" "No, I expect you to ask someone you trust." "Stop saying reasonable things. It's disorienting." "I'll try to be less consistent." The first major fight happened the next morning over shoes. I was leaving for Sorai House when Baek-jun stepped from near the elevator and said Mr. Seo had arranged a car. I said I was taking the subway. Baek-jun said there had been threats. I said Seoul's entire subway system had endured worse men than Park Jae-hyuk. Baek-jun looked pained. Mu-gyeol emerged from his study, phone in hand. "The car is safer," he said. "The subway is mine." That is not an argument. It's the only one that matters before 8 in the morning. His gaze dropped to my shoes, still damp at the soles from yesterday's walk to the market. There was a photographer outside Sorai House. There are photographers outside half the city. "Not asking about your ankle?" "My ankle is fine." I wasn't asking. I hated him for noticing the slight limp from a long shift. I hated him more because he looked genuinely confused by my anger, as if care delivered as instruction should be received as fact. "You hired me to appear as your spouse," I said. "You did not hire my roots, my shoes, or my right to be irritated underground with everyone else." Baek-jun studied the ceiling. Mu-gyeol put the phone into his pocket. "What do you suggest?" The question cut the legs from under my anger. "You don't get to do that. Ask? Make it difficult to accuse you of being unreasonable." "I can stop." "No, you can learn. There's a difference." We settled on this. I would take the subway unless a documented threat made the car necessary, and Baek-jun would ride 2 cars away without hovering like a funeral omen. Mu-gyeol agreed. Then he looked at my shoes again and said, "There is a cobbler near the restaurant. He opens at 9. Use my account." I glared. "Are you buying my obedience through leather care?" "I'm protecting the floor from water." Liar. Yes. That was the first morning I left his penthouse married and annoyed rather than afraid. Sejin leaned against the counter. "How are you?" The question nearly undid me because he asked it without strategy. I looked at the dining room, at table 3 with its folded receipt, at the teacups lined upside down, at the window where rain had dried into mineral spots. "I miss being poor in private." He nodded. "That I understand." His father came downstairs at noon wearing slippers and a winter coat, asking whether the taxmen had arrived. Sejin guided him back gently, but the old man saw me and brightened. Did you marry well?" I choked on tea. Sejin closed his eyes. "Appa." His father patted my arm. "Good. A person should have someone who comes when called." After he went upstairs, Sejin stared at the floor. "He thinks my mother is still alive on bad days. On good days, he insults my knife work. I prefer the insults." "You didn't tell me it got worse." "You were busy becoming a national headline." "I can be 2 disasters at once." He wiped the counter with unnecessary force. "I'm thinking of selling my share of the noodle counter idea. There's a care facility near Suwon. Good one. Expensive." The conversation shifted something between us. Sejin had always been the person feeding me through trouble. Now he needed more than jokes and poisoned soup fantasies. His dilemma made mine look less special and more ordinary in the cruelest way. Love, family, money. The same 3 ingredients ruined everyone differently. That evening, I told Mu-gyeol about Sejin's father because the restaurant might request schedule flexibility. I expected him to nod and assign someone to gather facts. Instead, he asked, "Does your friend want help or does he want options?" I looked up from the household expense statement. "You recognize a difference?" "I'm learning." "You use that line whenever you want credit for basic humanity." "Is it working?" "No." "Then I'll continue without expecting credit." He arranged nothing until I asked Sejin whether he wanted information about care facilities that did not steal from families. Sejin said yes after calling me a meddling bastard. Only then did Mu-gyeol have Secretary Im send a list of facilities, government subsidies, and an elder law attorney who offered a free consultation because, according to the email, someone had already paid the fee anonymously and then been forced by Attorney Moon to remove the anonymity. Sejin read the email twice. "Your husband is weird." "Legal husband with mafia ambiance. Don't use my own line against me during emotional moments." I smiled. It felt like borrowing normal life for 5 seconds. The Seo family summoned me on a Sunday. They called it lunch. It was an examination served with side dishes. The house in Seongbuk-dong sat behind walls old enough to pretend they had nothing to prove. Seo Mu-gyeol's grandfather, Seo Il-guk, received us in a room with low chairs and a view of pine trees clipped into obedience. He was smaller than I expected, which made him more alarming. Men who had not needed height for decades often cultivated stillness instead. Beside him sat Seo Yeon-hwa, the aunt who had watched me at dinner, and Seo Do-jin, Mu-gyeol's younger cousin, a courteous alpha with anxious hands and a smile that arrived half a second late. Chae Won-ik was there too, because punishment apparently enjoyed company. I bowed, not too deeply. The grandfather's eyes moved over me. "You work in a restaurant?" "Yes." "Still?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because food continues needing service after marriage." Do-jin looked down quickly. Yeonhwa's mouth twitched. Chae stirred his tea. Some people might see it as unsuitable. Some people see everything as an opportunity to reveal their imagination. Mu-gyeol sat beside me, quiet. The old man ignored him and addressed me for nearly an hour. He asked about my father's debt, my mother's health, my education, my future plans. Each question was polite enough to pass in public and sharp enough to draw blood in private. I answered only what I chose. When he pressed about whether an omega with my background could handle family obligations, Mu-gyeol's hand moved on the table. I touched his wrist lightly before he spoke. He stopped. The room noticed. I had not planned it. Neither had he. That made it worse. I turned to Seo Il-guk. Chairman, I manage drunk executives, allergic children, grieving widows, marriage proposals, foreign investors who think kimchi is a garnish, and cooks holding knives during supplier disputes. Family obligations seem similar, except your tableware is heavier. Dojin coughed into his tea. The grandfather stared. Then he laughed once, like a door opening in a wall no one knew had hinges. After lunch, Yeonhwa walked me through the garden, while Mu-gyeol was pulled into a private conversation with the old man. I expected threats. Instead, she stopped near a stone basin and said, "He was 14 when his father made him dismiss the driver who let his younger brother sneak out." I said nothing. The driver had a family. Mu-gyeol begged to keep him. My brother made him watch the man leave, then told him mercy was just another word for losing twice. She adjusted the cuff of her coat. "I am not telling you this, so you forgive him when he behaves badly." "Then why tell me?" "Because he will behave badly with excellent intentions. You should know the shape of the knife before it is placed near you." She was not kind. I respected that. Kindness in the Seo family would have felt like bait. "Are you helping him?" I asked. "I am helping the family survive its own habits. Sometimes that includes him. Sometimes it may include you." "And Che?" "Che wants safety through proximity to power. He is not evil. He is frightened of being ordinary after being raised as a bargaining chip." She looked toward the house. "Fear can make elegant people very ugly." As if summoned by the word ugly, Jae-hyuk appeared at Sorai House 2 days later, with a bruise near his jaw and a folder full of lies. He waited until the dinner rush, when customers could watch without admitting they watched. "My family is filing a fraud claim," he said. "You misrepresented the loan documents." I wiped my hands on my apron. "Did I also forge my father's death certificate while managing soup service?" "You signed receipt acknowledgement 3 years ago." "I signed a hospital discharge form 3 years ago." "The copies suggest otherwise." "Your copies must be very talented." He stepped closer. "SEO won't want a spouse under investigation." I thought of Mu-gyeol's grandfather, Che's careful fear, Yeonhwa's warning, Nari's anger, Sejin's father asking whether I married well. A week ago, this threat would have emptied my legs. Now it made me tired in a new way. Not brave, just unwilling to keep paying interest on other people's cruelty. I took out my phone and called Attorney Moon on speaker. Jae-hyuk's eyes narrowed. "Daeon," she answered on the second ring. "If this is not legally interesting, I'm charging double." "Park Jae-hyuk is at my workplace claiming I committed fraud through documents I haven't seen." "Wonderful. Put him on." I held out the phone. Jae-hyuk left. Sejin watched through the kitchen window. That was anticlimactic. I'm trying to reduce drama through billable hours. The fraud claim arrived anyway. So did an anonymous tip to a gossip account that my marriage was purchased. The article included a photograph of my mother's hospital entrance blurred badly enough to identify it by the blue sign. I stopped breathing for a second when I saw it. Mu-gyeol came to Sorai House within 20 minutes, not with an army, with Secretary Im and Baek Jun, which, for him, counted as restraint. He found me in the storage room counting napkins because numbers calmed me when people did not. "I'll move your mother tonight," he said. "No." "The hospital is exposed." "No." He closed the storage room door behind him. The space became smaller immediately, full of shelves, linen stacks, and the faint vinegar smell from pickled radish jars. "You da-on." "My mother has therapists there who know her. She knows the hallway from her room to the rehab gym. She knows the nurse who sings trot songs off-key. You don't get to uproot her because your first instinct is relocation. My first instinct is reducing access. And mine is remembering she is a person, not a vulnerability." His face went very still, too still. I should have softened. I did not. "You promised the difference between protection and ownership would matter." "It does." "Then make it matter while you're angry." For several seconds, he said nothing. I could hear the restaurant outside, chopsticks against bowls, Sejin calling for more broth, rain beginning at the alley door. Mu-gyeol looked at the shelves instead of at me. When he spoke, his voice was lower. "Tell me what you need." The anger inside me faltered, not because it vanished, but because it had expected a wall and met a door. More security at the hospital without changing her routine. Someone to remove photographers without scaring patients, a legal notice to the gossip account, and you tell me before you decide anything about my family. He nodded once. "Done." You don't get points for keeping a promise after trying to break it. I know. He left the storage room first. I leaned against a shelf and let the napkin packets press lines into my back until I trusted my legs again. The next 2 weeks taught me that a fake marriage could be made of calendar alerts. Monday belonged to Attorney Moon and the fraud claim. Tuesday belonged to Nari's ankle appointment, where she pretended not to need me until the doctor used the word rest and she looked ready to bite him. Wednesday belonged to Sejin, who visited an elder care center in Suwon and returned with pamphlets folded until their corners softened. Ashamed of considering help and angry that love could become logistics. Thursday belonged to Mu-gyeol's family, who sent invitations that read like commands and compliments that smelled of inspection. Through all of it, Mu-gyeol became less impressive in ways that mattered. He still spoke little. He still looked at threats as if they were rooms to be mapped, but he began asking before moving pieces. He waited outside my mother's room instead of transferring her. He sat in the back row of Nari's small rehearsal showcase and complimented the step she changed to protect her ankle, not the line everyone else praised. He sent Sejin Care Facility information only after I asked whether help would be welcome. None of those things made him gentle. They made him less careless with the lives near mine, which was rarer and harder to dismiss. The preview was part of the Succession Theater. Seorin Foundation had restored a collection of ceramic bowls from the late Joseon period, and Mu-gyeol's grandfather wanted us photographed near fragile history. I wore a navy suit. Mu-gyeol wore the expression of a man enduring culture for inheritance. Che drifted through the gallery speaking to donors. Seo Yeon-hwa watched everyone. Dojin looked ill. Halfway through, a donor's child knocked a small display stand with his sleeve. A bowl tipped. It did not fall far. The security case stopped it, but the sound of porcelain striking glass cracked through the room. Mu-gyeol went white. No one else saw at first. His face did not change enough for them. But I was standing beside him, close enough to see the blood leave his knuckles. His hand reached toward the case, stopped, closed into a fist, and dropped. Then he walked away. I followed after a moment, not because I had the right, but because his absence felt like a door left open in a storm. I found him downstairs in a storage room lined with old crates. He stood before a wooden box, one hand braced on the lid. Inside lay a broken Celadon cup, carefully wrapped except for the pieces arranged like a wound. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "I know." He did not tell me to leave. The cup was small, child-sized perhaps, with a painted crane split through the wing. Mu-gyeol touched the edge of one shard with a finger and withdrew before contact. "My brother broke it," he said. "He was 9. He took it from my grandfather's display because he wanted to drink barley tea from something no one was allowed to use." I stood still. My father made the staff search every room. My brother hid under my bed with the pieces in his hands. He had cut his palm. Mu-gyeol's voice remained controlled, but each sentence seemed selected with effort. "I told him I would fix it. I was 15. I believed promises were tools. Use them properly and outcomes changed." What happened? My father found out before I could take the blame. The housekeeper who helped clean the blood was dismissed. My brother was sent abroad 2 months later. He died there at 17. His hand rested on the box again. The cup stayed. The room smelled of dust and wood and distant varnish. Above us, donors praised preservation, restoration, the noble work of saving beautiful objects. Down here, Mu-gyeol kept a broken cup because a child had wanted to use something forbidden and learned the price of wanting. "Why show me?" I asked quietly. "I didn't." That was true. I had followed. The distinction mattered. He closed the box. "My grandfather will ask me tonight to make our marriage permanent before the vote. He will offer to erase Park, fund your restaurant, secure your family, and place your sister under foundation sponsorship. In exchange, the exit clause disappears." My mouth went dry. "I could make the offer sound kind," he said. "I know how. I could tell you it solves everything." "Will you?" "No." He finally looked at me. The crack in him had narrowed but not vanished. "If removing your door is the price of my succession, I lose the vote." The words should have relieved me. Instead, they frightened me because they had weight. He was not offering a gesture. He was cutting away something he had been raised to value more than sleep, tenderness, or his own name. "You decided alone again," I said. "Yes." "You decided in my favor, but still alone." His eyes lowered for 1 second. "Yes." That was the moment I understood the problem with falling for a man like Seo Mu-gyeol. His restraint was real, his care was real, his willingness to bleed quietly for another person was real, but he could still turn sacrifice into a locked room if no one stopped him. He would remove himself from the equation and call it respect, leaving the other person with a loss they had not chosen. "Don't lose the vote for me without asking me what I'm willing to fight," I said. He looked up. "I'm not your brother," I continued. "I'm not a cup someone broke, and I'm not a door you nobly keep open while standing on the other side." "I know." "No, you're learning." For once he almost smiled. It looked painful and brief. "I'm learning." We returned upstairs separately. The public announcement never happened. Seo Il-guk's disappointment could have chilled soup. Che watched Mu-gyeol with something like fear. Do-jin drank too much water. Yeonhwa looked at me as if I had become a variable she approved of but would not admit to. 3 days later, Nari disappeared for 4 hours. She did not vanish dramatically. No black van, no ransom call, no scene from a bad thriller. She turned off her phone after rehearsal and failed to come home. That was enough. By the 2nd hour, I had called every classmate whose number I had. By the 3rd, Mu-gyeol had security checking cameras without saying the word tracking because he had learned it made me murderous. By the 4th, Nari walked into Sorai house with rain in her hair and a file folder under her arm. I nearly shouted. Then I saw her face. "What did you do?" I asked. She put the folder on table 3. Her hands trembled. "I found Dad's old storage box. The documents inside smelled of mold and dust, receipts, loan copies, a notebook with my father's uneven handwriting. A photo of Jae-hyuk's uncle standing beside my father outside a golf club, both smiling like men who believed paper could bury the future. "I remembered Dad hiding something in the practice room," Nari said. "Before he died, I thought it was cash. It was this." Attorney Moon arrived. Mu-gyeol arrived. Sejin closed the restaurant early and pretended it was due to a gas issue while feeding everyone noodles. We spread the papers across the private room table. For once, the space served us instead of men with louder watches. Attorney Moon found it first. A signature mismatch on the loan transfer, then a date that placed my father in the hospital when he supposedly signed an extension, then a company seal tied to Park's uncle. The debt was not merely inflated, it had been revived after death using forged consent. Nari sat beside me, pale and furious. "I should have looked earlier." I took her hand. "You were 17. I knew he was hiding things. We all knew. Knowing isn't proof. She looked at Mu-gyeol. "Can you destroy them with this?" He did not answer quickly. "Legally, Attorney Moon can begin. Publicly, yes, if Daeon agrees. Privately, my family can apply pressure, but that may create obligations he does not want." Nari blinked. "You're asking?" "I'm trying." She looked at me. Something in her expression loosened, only slightly. "Good." The final pressure came at the succession review, because powerful families have a talent for scheduling emotional disasters with catering. The review was held at Seorin's old headquarters, a stone building near City Hall, in a boardroom where portraits of dead men stared down as if disappointed by chairs with wheels. I attended because I chose to. Attorney Moon sat in the outer conference room with a laptop and 3 backup drives. Nari waited with Sejin at Sorai House, ready to release documents to reporters if we failed to call by 4. Mu-gyeol did not like that part. I liked it very much. Before we entered, he stopped beside a window overlooking traffic. "Last chance to leave." "Your family says that too often. It's losing charm." "I mean it." "I know." He looked at my hand. "May I?" I gave it to him. His fingers closed around mine, firm but not possessive. That distinction had become easy to feel and impossible to explain. Inside, the board waited with Seo Il-guk at the head, Yeonhwa to one side, Do-jin near the back, Che beside a lawyer I did not recognize, and Park Jae-hyuk standing by the screen with the expression of a man about to enjoy himself. I wondered if he had ever learned pleasure without an audience. Chai began courteously. He spoke of stability, public trust, family image, the unfortunate risk of attaching succession to a spouse under legal suspicion. He did not insult me. He did worse. He pitied the family for having to consider my unsuitability. Then Jae-hyuk presented the forged loan documents. Mu-gyeol stood. I touched his sleeve, the same place I had adjusted at dinner. He stopped. This time, I did not stop him because I wanted to protect him from speaking. I stopped him because the next move was mine. I rose. My legs felt steady, which surprised me until I realized I had been preparing for this longer than the contract, longer than the dinner, longer than Mu-gyeol. I had been preparing since the first time someone mistook my bills for a handle. "My father borrowed money," I said. "He lied to us. He made poor decisions. That much is true." The room quieted. He did not sign these extensions. He was hospitalized on 2 of the dates. On another, he was already dead. The company that revived the debt is connected to Director Park's uncle through 2 shells and 1 very careless accountant. Attorney Moon has filed the criminal complaint. The evidence is being sent to the prosecutor's office and to 3 reporters if I do not confirm otherwise within the hour. Jae-hyuk's face changed. Finally, completely. I turned to Che. "You were given those documents by the Park side. Maybe you believed them. Maybe you chose not to check because my shame was useful. That is between you and whatever remains of your conscience." Che's fingers tightened around his pen. For once, he had no polished reply. Seo Il-guk looked at Mu-gyeol. "Control your spouse." There it was. The family creed in 3 words. Mu-gyeol stood slowly. I expected anger. I expected cold, surgical threats. Instead, he removed his wedding ring and placed it on the table. "He is not here as my instrument," he said. The room went so still that traffic outside sounded fictional. Mu-gyeol continued. "The marriage agreement is dissolved as of this morning. All protections promised to Yuda-on and his family were made irrevocable 2 days ago through independent legal instruments. They are not dependent on his cooperation, silence, public support, or continued relationship with me." My breath caught. Attorney Moon had mentioned a document for review. I had not known he had already signed his side. Seo Il-guk's face hardened. "You dissolved the condition." "Yes." "You throw away succession for an Omega who may leave you by dinner?" Mu-gyeol looked at me, then back at him. If he cannot leave, his staying means nothing. It was not a speech. It was barely a confession. It was one sentence placed where his family had expected a chain. My throat tightened in a way I refused to display in front of dead portraits and living predators. "For the record," I said, because dignity sometimes required paperwork, "I have not decided dinner." Do-jin laughed. It burst out of him and died immediately when his grandfather looked over. But the damage was done. Seo Yeon-hwa leaned back, eyes bright. Then she placed a folder on the table. "Since Mu-gyeol has failed the old condition, perhaps we discuss the new one." Seo Il-guk turned slowly. "Yeon-hwa. The company cannot survive another decade of succession rules that reward coercion and punish judgment. I have signatures from enough minority holders to require a governance review. Do-jin?" Do-jin stood, pale but upright. "I support it." The room fractured without anyone raising a fist. That was how power actually broke. Not with shouting, but with paper, timing, and people deciding fear had become too expensive. Che withdrew his objection before the lawyers could advise him, which told me he was frightened but not stupid. Jae-hyuk tried to leave and found Baek-jun waiting outside with 2 uniformed officers Attorney Moon had arranged through proper complaint procedure, a phrase she later repeated with almost romantic satisfaction. Mu-gyeol did not win the succession vote that day. No one did. The vote was suspended pending review. Seo Il-guk was not defeated. Men like him did not vanish because younger relatives discovered ethics. But his certainty cracked. For that family, it was almost a revolution. Afterward, in the empty corridor, Mu-gyeol stood beside me with his ring in his palm. "You signed the dissolution without telling me," I said. "Yes." "I'm angry." "I expected that." "I'm also relieved." "I hoped for that." "I don't know what to do with you." His mouth moved faintly. "I have that effect." "You're not charming." "I didn't claim to be." The ring looked small in his hand. Temporary metal, plain and legally exhausted. "Why 2 days ago?" I asked. "After your sister found the documents, I realized the benefit you needed from me could be secured without keeping you tied to me. So I secured it." "And if I had wanted to fight beside you as your spouse?" "Then I should have asked." "Yes." "I'm sorry." The apology was quiet, unadorned, and therefore difficult to dismiss. I took the ring from his palm, not to wear it, to look at it. "I don't accept love as compensation." "I know." "I don't accept suffering as proof." "I know." "I don't accept being protected into a smaller life." "I know that too." "What do you accept?" I asked. He looked tired then, not dramatically, not beautifully, just like a man who had spent years sleeping beside decisions instead of rest. Dinner, he said. If you decide. I did not go to dinner with him that night. I went to Seoul house where Nari cried in the storage room from delayed fear, and Sejin pretended not to cry while chopping garlic with unnecessary violence. Attorney Moon arrived with fried chicken and the expression of a victorious warlord. My mother called to ask whether the polite man was still feeding nurses. When I told her the marriage had been dissolved, she said, "Good. Now if you like him, it will be your own fault." For 3 weeks, I lived in my apartment again. The collectors stopped calling because forged debts lose confidence when prosecutors learn their names. My mother's treatment continued through documents Attorney Moon described as beautifully annoying. Nari took 2 weeks off dance, not forever, not in defeat, because her body had been asking and she finally listened. Sejin chose the care facility near Suwon for his father and hated himself until the old man called to complain that the soup lacked character. Mu-gyeol did not crowd me. He came to Seoul house once a week for lunch, reserving under his own name, always sitting at table 3 because he knew it wobbled and, he said, respected its persistence. He sent no gifts. The first time he brought anything, it was a folder of municipal grants for accessible dining rooms covered with his careful notes. At the top, he had written, "For when the envelope is ready." On the 4th week, I asked him to stay after closing. We sat with the chairs turned upside down around us, 2 cups of barley tea between us, and no cameras to please. I gave him my terms. We would date, not remarry for a succession vote. My restaurant plan would remain mine. He would ask before solving. I would tell him when I turned fear into pride and called it independence. He listened as if each sentence deserved a signature. "And you learn one soup properly," I added. "One?" he asked. "I'm not optimistic." His condition was quieter. "You don't perform strength until you forget you're allowed to be tired." I hated how reasonable it sounded, so I took his hand across the repaired table and said, "Dinner. Tonight? Don't panic." "I'm attempting not to." "You look calm." "That is the panic." Months did not make us simple. The Seo family remained a maze with better lawyers, but Yeonhwa's review clipped enough old claws for Mu-gyeol to breathe between obligations. My blue envelope under the rice cooker grew heavier by small, stubborn amounts. One evening, after Sejin finally repaired table 3 with a proper bracket, Mu-gyeol came in after closing and noticed the missing wobble before he sat. I tied our temporary wedding ring, returned by Attorney Moon, around the jar where I kept the old folded receipts that had once balanced the table. Outside, rain began softly against the window. I poured barley tea, too strong on purpose, and watched him add water, taste, regret, adjust. When he finally got it right, I leaned across the steady table and kissed him as myself, with the chairs stacked around us and the city waiting like a guest patient enough to be seated.